Hi, I'm Jeff from Western Sydney Crime and Going Combatives, and with me I have Paul from PJM Lawyers. We're continuing in our video series of self-defence in the law, and today we're talking about a very controversial issue, and that's weapons in self-defence. So Paul, just by the general nature of certain weapons, there are some that you just cannot use under any circumstances.
That's exactly right, Jeff. So in this state we have a Prohibited Weapons Act, and Schedule 1 of that Act tells us that certain weapons we're just not allowed to have or to use. And from a martial arts perspective, they would include things like star knives, nunchucks, brass knuckles or knuckle dusters. It includes tasers and things like that. It also includes certain knives like flick knives and butterfly knives, but anybody can look up that schedule, and it's Schedule 1 on the Prohibited Weapons Act. Now, importantly, some people can get exemption to have some of those weapons, Jeff, and for example, they may be able to have those weapons for theatrical purposes, historical purposes. They may be collectors, or they might be for sporting purposes, or say for the example, a telescopic baton is a prohibited weapon, but some people are allowed to have those for work purposes. But what we always need to remember, if you have them for one purpose, for example, you're a collector, if you then use it, for example, in martial arts or to protect yourself or for any other reason, once again it falls outside your permit and you'll be deemed to have a prohibited weapon. Now, under the Act, that carries a maximum penalty of 14 years, so it's something which is deemed as very serious in our society.
So Paul, another area where there's a lot of mixed messages going around is that of carrying knives. When is it okay to carry a knife?
Yeah. Okay, well, under the Summary Offences Act, it specifically prohibits you carrying a knife to defend yourself or to defend another person. And in fact, Section 11C of the Summary Offences Act prohibits you from carrying a knife in public generally. Now, it's pretty serious. It carries a maximum of 2 years imprisonment if you're convicted of carrying a knife. Now, there are some exemptions where you are allowed to carry a knife in a public place, and that includes for your occupation, if it's part of a ceremonial uniform, for example, or if you're in the pursuit of a sporting or recreational activity, and I would assume that would include things like fishing or going out and rappelling down ropes where you might need a knife to cut the ropes or something like that. So generally, Jeff, the problem is with knives, you can't just carry them around just in case you may need them. You need to have a reasonable excuse, and a reasonable excuse is not for self-defence purposes.
Okay. So one area that I've heard is that I was told that if you purchase a knife in the morning and retain the receipt, I spoke to a guy who said he would buy a knife every morning from the $2 store, carry it on him all day, go to work. When he get off the train, when he get home, he put it away, but he had that receipt on him, and he claims that would protect him in court.
Yeah, well, Jeff, I can see where the argument would come from. He'd say, well, I just purchased it that day, but there would be a lot of objective features that an investigating police officer, for example, would look at, and they would include, is the knife still in its packaging? Is it still wrapped up? Is it in the bag from the shop that you bought it from? How long earlier did you buy it? So, for example, if you were to buy it in the morning at Penrith and then catch a train into the Sydney and then walk around all day in Sydney with a knife in your pocket, you can start to see that your argument of the necessity of carrying that knife could start to fall apart pretty quickly. And then in particular, if you then go out drinking that night and an incident happens and the knife gets used, I think you're going to have some problems winning that argument. I'm not saying it's not arguable, but would you be in a good position with that argument? I don't professionally think so.